Yes, I really enjoy it. I was trying to think while you were speaking about the little bit of math. If you go back 10 generations, just your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, no uncles, no aunts, no cousins. If you go back 10 generations, you are then related to 1,122 people, I think. Someone else can figure out the math. And those are your direct ancestors, just 10 generations back. And the other piece that's important to that is that if any one of them had not lived and reproduced, you would not be here this minute. That's how connected you are to those people. Like their lives mean you have your life.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have an amazing author on the show today, and I have a history from Scotland. That's where my family's come from. I can trace my roots back there. So the opportunity to talk to Carolyn here on the podcast today is exciting because she writes about things that are very meaningful to me and my family. So I'm excited to get into that. That's going to be a fun conversation, but Carolyn's here on the podcast, and she also has a person sitting beside her. Anne is here as well to kind of be a part of the conversation, and these two work together as publisher and author, and it's a great combination to have them both on the show. So to Carolyn and to Anne, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for having us. We're thrilled to be here.
Excellent. Anne, seeing that you work so well with Carolyn, can you please introduce us to Carolyn, the author, and maybe how the two of you started working together?
Oh, it would be my pleasure. Carolyn Nicholson, Carolyn J. Nicholson, is an author of historical fiction and came to me through the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia, which is an incredible organization. Shout out to WFNS. Carolyn had done some workshops there, and she, now if I'm not mistaken, came to me through a program that WFNS has called Coffee Chat, where the Federation connects members with experts in certain areas, editors or designers or whatever. And she was looking for advice on publishing. So we had a chat and just got along like a house on fire. And then she did I did some online Zoom sessions, Saturday sessions, that she and her sister were involved in. And then it just all sort of flowed from there. My associate publisher, Marianne Ward, who's also one of my editors, took on the project with great gusto, and so has been Carolyn's editor. And we're now working on another book with Carolyn. So we can't let her go. We love her. And she has this amazing background, Scottish background. She loves to visit Scotland, and is quite a storyteller. So we love being regaled with stories of Scotland.
Amazing. Well, Carolyn, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad to have you here. And it sounds like you have a great partnership with Anne, so I'm so glad that Anne can be part of our conversation today. Carolyn, tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit about your heritage. Let's talk about your family.
Well, where to begin?
Yeah.
My mother, when she retired, decided she was going to research our ancestors. And she did quite a bit of work, but this was in the days before computers. So she wrote everything up in 3-ring binders. And when I retired, I thought the best thing I could do to honor her, because she would get quite upset with us because we weren't as appreciative as she thought of the work that she was doing. So I thought the best thing I can do to honor her is to continue her work. So I started researching everything I could research. I had no background or training in it, so it was simply a matter of trial and error. And I got a long ways with some people, with some of my ancestors, and others not so much, hardly anything. That was my background, and that's how I got started. And I didn't know anything about writing. So the first book I wrote, I thought, well, I had all this material, so what will I do with it? So I thought, well, I'll write a book. If I can read books, how hard could it be to write a book? So see, this is where I started. That was my thought. How hard could it be? And so then I found out, because it was a steep learning curve.
So where in Scotland can you trace your roots back to, Carolyn?
My father was a Nicolson, And it took me 50 years to find out that he was from the Isle of Skye, but that is totally confirmed now. And so I've joined the Clan McNichol, and now I'm helping plan their 2026 international clan gathering, because we're spread out in New Zealand, Australia, the United States, Canada, and Britain. And we're all going to get together in 2026 here in Halifax. So so I joined that, because that was great. I finally found someone. My mother was a McDonald. Not so much luck there. I never knew there were so many McDonald's in the world. And I just can't pin anybody down over in Scotland. So that was a big disappointment. I tried very hard to do that.
That's interesting, because the Campbell family and the McDonald family were not the best of friends.
No, they
No.
And I think you mentioned that last time, and I thought afterwards, it's interesting what good memories we have.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we probably weren't the best neighbors to each other, I think, in the past. But we're going to be fine, right, Carolyn? We're going to be fine in this interview. Nothing's going to get crazy here. We're going to be fine together. I love this. I just love the stories of tracing back your roots and understanding where you come from. And it opens the door to kind of who you are as a person. And I think when I read your books and read about you, Carolyn, just the idea that we can, through story, we can find our own identity. Like, we can figure out who we are and why we're here. And to know more about our past is just amazing. And to find out some of the hardships that the people that came before us had to live through just to survive. Mm-hmm. Where today we kind of take it for granted. Mm-hmm. That, we have what we have and we feel pretty comfortable. But there were some really tough times in the past that our family members lived through. Was there any stories that you kind of uncovered, Carolyn, through your research, and that kind of made you sit back and go, wow, like, I didn't know that about my family?
Well, that's what I write about in the book that called Traders, Cannibals, Highlanders, and Vikings. The cannibals one was an interesting one to research. The cannibals, in that they were quite a fairly well-off group of people that chartered a ship and came over to Prince Edward Island, and then nearly starved to death. And they had a really hard time. I can't even find out too much about where everybody left, but 15 of the families that came over that nearly starved to death went over to Nova Scotia, and among them was one of my ancestors. But whenever I have a problem, I think about those people on Prince Edward Island nearly starving to death, and I think, well, you don't really actually have a problem. That they had a problem. You don't have a problem. So it certainly has given me sort of a lot of perspective on, what's truly a problem and what isn't,
So for your audience, Carolyn, who would you say would be a great reader for any of your books or all of your books? Do you have somebody in mind that would really enjoy these stories?
Well, with my children's story, I hope nearly all children would enjoy it. It certainly is quite specific to my background, but I think the story itself is just an interesting story for children. So I'm hoping that any child that, I guess, speaks English would be interested in it. The book Traders, I think that anybody who is in the Maritimes, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, any of those folks would be interested in it, because there's stories in it from all those locations. And I think, like I say, I don't write to a certain audience or anything like that. I just write about what interests me, but I assume that other people would be interested in it too. And like I say, I think anyone in the Maritimes would be interested in Traders, and probably lots of other folks across Canada who have Scottish backgrounds or wonder about their ancestors, where they came from. I think anyone like that might be interested.
I like that. And again, capturing history and bringing stories to life, I think that's a beautiful thing that you can do for us, Carolyn. So that's exciting. So we have authors that listen to the show, Carolyn, and they're like, at the very beginning stages of writing. They're just curious about writing. Maybe they've written a few things here and there, but they're now listening to podcasts and they're listening to people like you, Carolyn, going, well, Carolyn did it. I think I can do this. Do you have any advice for a newer author early in their journey of becoming an author? Maybe some advice that would have helped you at the beginning that now today you understand. What could you tell a fellow author to encourage them if they were here with us right now?
Well, I can tell them what I learned myself and what I would do differently if I had to do it again. And I would take some courses in writing novels. If it's fiction they want to write or historical fiction, I would take some courses. And Anne's already mentioned the Writers Federation of Nova Scotia, who puts on quite a few courses. But I imagine there's lots of other places too that you can get courses. And I would have done myself a favor of having at least some kind of an idea of how to go about it and where you can go wrong, because I did plenty of that. I can talk a lot about what not to do, because I did it all, I think. But besides getting a little bit of background before you get started, I think it's good to know, and I learned this through taking courses over time, that some people are the organized kind, and they plan everything else, everything out, and they call them plotters. And I discovered I'm not that. The others, they call the ones that just do it off the cuff, they call pantsers, off by the seat of your pants. And I'm more of that kind. That was good to know, because I kept trying to organize everything and tried to do it in an organized way, and it never worked out. And then I discovered this concept that some people do it one way and some people do it another.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think you have to find the way that works best for you. And there's a lot of advice out there. There's a lot of great people like Anne who can help you as well, which is great. Yeah. But you really got to find the way that works best for you, because we're all different.
One other thing that I read in a book that Marianne loaned me about editors, if you're going to write a book, it might be good to contact someone who would be an editor of the kind of book you want to write, and to work with them a little bit, because editors can give you ever so much good advice. And if you start, lots of time, what I did was I wrote everything, and then I looked for an editor. And of course, then they chopped out half of what I wrote. And so then I thought, well, I should have started off with, being in touch with an editor, and maybe they could give me some good guidance about the kind of book that I'm going to write. And then hopefully along the line, perhaps they can do some overviews of it to make sure that I'm not, that they're not going to have to cut half of it out.
And it's a very close relationship. Mm-hmm. So finding like the right personality and the person with the right skill set is important as well.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine it being kind of like getting into a sailboat and just kind of pushing away from the dock. And I'm sailing. Well, where are you going? I don't know where I'm going, but I'm a sailor. I'm a writer. I'm writing. But do you know what you're writing? No, I have no idea where I'm going. But it's nice to have somebody who knows what they're doing.
How do I get back? I don't know how to get back either.
Right. So Anne will jump into your sailboat and help you, direct you, and keep you on your target. And I love that.
Yeah. It's a great metaphor. I love to sail.
Yeah.
There you go. See, we got that all together. That's right. I brought that in because I love Nova Scotia as well. So there you go. It's good. Now, Carolyn, you mentioned to us before we hit record that you would love to read a little portion to us from one of your books.
Yes, I would.
A couple of your books. Yes. I would love to do that. And because as a listener, I love listening to an author read from their own book, because I could read your book out loud, but to hear it from the author themselves, I think it's just a little bit better. I just love hearing it from the author themselves. So can you kind of introduce to us maybe what you're going to read to us, a little portion, and kind of from the book and kind of how this all fits together into the story of your book as well?
Okay, this is the book that I'm going to read from, The Last Witch on Skye. And I'm just going to read a little portion where they have once again gotten into trouble. Maggie, her two fairy friends, Maggie's a witch, and her two fairy friends have gotten in trouble again. And so I'm just going to read a little bit about the kind of trouble that they're in this time. Okay. "What's going on?" Sean yelled at Ian. "Don't know, Sean. I fell in just like you did, and it was so dark I couldn't see a thing. I yelled and yelled, then I got hungry. He hopped down from the rock. I'm so glad you found me. Don't be too glad, Ian. We're all lost together now. A half hour of trying to push open the invisible door resulted in disappointment. Finally, Maggie said, let's search this place. Maybe there's another way out. Since no one had a better idea, they followed Maggie as she lit the way forward. The cavern was very large with a lock in the middle. They skirted around the water, sometimes crawling over boulders or climbing onto ledges. They had no idea where they were going. I need to stop for a rest, Maggie, Ian said, and sat down on the nearest rock. His companions joined him. No one said anything. Everyone was wondering the same thing. Are we ever going to get out of here? After a bit of a rest, Maggie said, come on, we must find a way out. No sooner had she spoken than they heard an ear-splitting roar that filled the cavern and resounded off the walls. Ian grabbed Sean, and Sean grabbed Maggie, and they huddled together for a long time. What had been a bad situation was now so much worse. How much worse, they didn't know. Whatever could that be, Maggie? Sean asked. It sounded like a dragon, Ian said. How could that be? Sean said. There's no dragons in Scotland. Could be a Welsh dragon. My mother was a Welsh fairy, and she told me stories about them, Ian replied. The other two looked puzzled. Weren't dragons extinct? Well, there's nothing we can do but move forward, Maggie said, and they crept along as quietly as possible, eventually coming to a small chamber. Could it be in there? Ian whispered. It's too small, I think, Sean said. Another roar filled the cavern, causing the friends to shake uncontrollably and fall to the ground. After the echo of the roar died out, Maggie said, I'm going to crawl forward to investigate the chamber. Don't, Maggie, Ian said, his voice trembling. I'll go with you, Sean said, trying to control his shaky hands. No, Sean, you stay with Ian in case I don't come back. She took a deep breath to calm her nerves and crawled forward until the fairies lost sight of her. Minutes later, she returned. What did you see, Maggie? Asked Sean and Ian in unison. Maggie said, it's a dragon, all right. Come see.
Okay, now I want to go check out the dragon. That works. Okay, so Carolyn, for that book in particular, kind of what was the inspiration to write that? Like you mentioned your father's background and where he came from. Does that tie into your family directly?
Yes, I went to Skye many times searching for my Nicolson ancestors, and there's more Nicholsons on Skye than you'd ever meet anywhere else, and I felt I was on the right track. But it took quite a few times going back before I finally found a way to discover in a census from 1841 exactly where they lived and what their names were and their 5 sons. And so that was, I spent a lot of time on Skye. And while I was over there on one of these trips, I bought a book called Mysterious Skye and Loch Elsh. And Skye had always been full of witches and fairies and all these sorts of things. And so one time, my little writers group, we give each other things to do, little writings to do when we get together. So we had decided on some words about witches and fairies and things like that. We were supposed to write a little story about that, 1,200 words. So that's what I did. And then I was so interested in it, I kept going back to it. I was supposed to be working on something else. And I kept going back to it and working on it. And then I took a little course on writing for children because it started to sound like a children's book to me. And then I found Anne, and she gave me some more help. And then it got published. And so I never set out to write a children's book. I had no background in it. I had never taken any courses in it before starting out. Never any intention whatsoever. And it's the last thing I think I would have thought I would do. And it was just a wonderful experience. I've loved every minute of it.
So, Carolyn, how do you connect with an audience of children as a children's author compared to how you connect with adults with your other novels and your things you write? Anything that you do now, looking back, you're like, yeah, this is a good thing that authors writing for children should know. How do you connect with that audience?
You have to be very careful writing for children, I found out. Of course, you have to know what age group that you're trying to aim it at so that you'll use the right language. And then there's a lot of things you shouldn't do, words that you couldn't use or.
Yeah.
one of the funny things was, usually in a story there usually has to be, a bad guy, someone who's causing the trouble, and the other characters are trying to figure it out. Well, in this day and age, it's pretty hard to name anybody as a bad guy. I had to make somebody up. So, in any case, it was a wonderful experience, but I got lots of advice and help once I realized that that's what it was. So, if you're thinking of writing a children's book, do be very careful when you start out and get lots of advice, because there's many, many ways you can go wrong.
Right. And for your book specifically, do you have a target age group for listeners that would understand this would be the right book for them?
This is middle grade is what I think you call it these days. Middle grade, 8 to 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, as listeners are listening, they're like, oh, I wonder if that's the right age for my children. That book would be good for my kids or my relatives' kids. So it's good to know.
There's a bit in it about people in Skye spoke. In Nova Scotia, we say Gaelic, and over there they say Gaelic. So there's a little glossary at the front with some Gaelic words and pronunciation in it, just to have a little fun with some of that.
Excellent. See, now there's so much. Now, I'm not a kid, Carol. I might look young, but I'm not a kid. So I'm interested in that, just to learn some of those words as well.
Marianne, who was the editor of this book, said it's something that really was dear to my heart. She said, no matter how many times I edit, she said, I never get tired of the story. So that was like an important thing for me to hear, because, I guess there's lots of ways you could write a story where it wouldn't be too exciting or once through, and that's, that's it.
It's a fun read.
Yeah.
And we also call it like a first chapter book. Mm-hmm. So, early readers,
nice.
We've had feedback from a young reader who's probably around 10, who said she loved the glossary in the front. So we kind of went back and forth with that.
That's got to be a rewarding experience, Carolyn, to hear back from a young reader like that, to know that your words in that book has connected with a young reader. That's got to be special for you.
Oh, it is, because that's my big dream with this. I mean, when you write books, you can't go into it thinking you're going to make any money or anything like that. You go in because you hope your story will be rewarding to someone else, that they'll enjoy it. And the idea of bringing joy to children and having a break from children have lots of problems too. And this is sort of like a nice break from all your troubles, and you can just go off to this island and with the fairies and the dragons and the witches and have a wonderful time. Amazing.
Now, you did say, I think, when before we record, that you could also possibly read to us from another book. Is that possible? Which one do you have?
This one is called Traders, Cannibals, Highlanders, and Vikings. And I'll read a little spot from this. I'll just give a little bit of background. Because I wanted to write about my ancestors, I had all this material, and I wanted to write about them. I had to think about how could I do that. And anyway, I came up with a way of doing it. And in that, Caroline, the main character in the book, is not doing too well. She's trying to write a book, actually, but she's not doing very well. After a whole year, she doesn't even have her first chapter done. Her sisters are really worried about her. And so, unknown to her, of course, her ancestors, who she's researched, are quite interested in the whole event. And they have decided that they are going to help her write the book. And so this is their first meeting. When they decide their methodology and this sort of thing. So this is the ancestors that are in this book, and they're, like I say, this is their first meeting to try to help Caroline write her book. And there's a reason why they're very interested in this. Well, everyone is here, right? We've gathered to see what we can do to help Caroline write this book, Samson said. So far, Martha chimed in, she's only got a bit of an outline for chapter 1, even though she's been doing research and writing for over a year. How are we going to help her? Malcolm Nicholson asked. I know, his son Donald said. Let's help her out in dreams. We're from the Isle of Skye, so dreams, fairies, omens, and portents are our bread and butter. I don't see how any of those things are going to get this book written, Samson said. But don't you see, interrupted William MacDonald, she can come with us and see for herself. Probably scare her to death is what you'll do, David Stewart said. Nay, his wife Mary said, I think she's up for a little adventure. A little adventure is not what we're talking about. Did any of you have a little adventure? If so, say aye. I thought not. We're talking about authentic experience. The rest were silent for a moment. All right, Sampson said, nothing spared, but nothing added either. I'm thinking of you, MacDonald. You can be a bit over the top at times. MacDonald grinned. The Moores, Stewarts, Beggs, MacDonalds, Mackenzies, and Nicholsons all agreed to try out Donald's suggestion. They hoped it would help Caroline. Now, Sampson said, I hope we can all agree that at the beginning of the adventure, we will introduce ourselves, if she doesn't already know or guess who we are. But after that, she'll not know what will happen or how the adventure will turn out. The experience needs to be real. Will she know any background to the adventure, Martha asked. I think she can know the history leading up to the adventure, but again, not what happens during the adventure, Sampson said, looking around at the group. Agreed? They all nodded in agreement. Just before the meeting ended, Janet Begg asked, what's the book about? We need to know to best be of help. Sampson smiled broadly. It's about us, the first of her ancestors to come to Nova Scotia, Anne MacDonald asked. To Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, Malcolm Nicholson corrected. Someone actually remembers us? William and Flora Mackenzie said in sync. Caroline does, and she wants others to know about it. We're going to be in a book.
Okay, so I got to ask, does Caroline know Carolyn at all? Like, is there a connection between those two interesting people at all? Maybe.
In my little writers group, we had a discussion about the approach to this. And one of the people in the group said, well, you can have an avatar. Now, I had never heard the word avatar before. So I thought, well, what's that? Well, I guess it's someone that represents you in a story or in some kind of game. I think it's something to do with games on. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, okay, that's what I'll have. I'll have an avatar. And she'll go with the ancestors and have all these adventures. So I don't know if I got the idea of avatar correct or not, but she might have something to do with me.
You'll have to buy the book and read it to find out. Right, Carolyn?
That's right.
That's how we do that.
We do that.
Excellent. So, Carolyn, my podcast is called Living the Next Chapter, and I kind of use the title of my podcast as a question for my guests. I'm curious for you, with all of the books you've written and all the projects you've been a part of, how are you living your next chapter? Like, what do you see down the road for yourself as a writer, for you personally? I'm really curious, what are you doing to live your next chapter?
As a writer, I'm already having another book in the editing process. And it's about, again, another ancestor I've researched, a woman this time. And it's a long process, the editing and the revision. It goes on for quite a long time. I'm glad Marianne has a lot of patience. And I really would like to do a sequel to Last Witch. When I was in Skye in October, I was thinking, okay, that would be a nice scene if I put it there, and this would be a nice scene if I put it here. And so I'm quite interested in doing that, but I've got to get this other book properly edited before I move on to something new, I think. Excellent.
Well, see, I'm always curious to see what authors are up to. We always want to celebrate the most recent book and what's happening right now, but it's kind of like curious, what are you working on? Where are you feeling led next? Because as readers, when we find an author we love, we're always anticipating and hoping for the next thing from them. So I always like to put that out for the readers. When they fall in love with you, there's a great library already to start with, but there's always maybe something coming down the road. I like that.
Can I tell you a little bit about how I decided to write the book that I'm doing a revision on now?
Please.
I have, of course, lots of ancestors that I've researched, and I was trying to think what I was going to do, what approach I was going to take, how I was going to, figure it out. And I discovered I had some second cousins, which were unknown to me before. And one of them, a lady in St. John, talked on the phone for a little bit, and then she said, I'm going to send you something. And she sent me a little old book published in, more like a booklet, published in 1853, about the writings of this man called the Reverend William Thomas Wishart, who married one of my relatives. Well, talk about an interesting person, and set in St. John. So that was the impetus, really. That was where I made the decision. That's what I'm going to write about, because that guy sounds so interesting. And, the fact that he was married to my second great aunt, and I can make a story from there. And so 100,000 words later, we have a story.
There you go. Just like that. I love it. I'm a huge history fan as well, Carolyn, so I love anything to do with history. I love when somebody writes from that perspective, because it draws me into the story. It gives me a snapshot, a look back at where we come from, like we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. And I just love people who stir up the stories of our past, that as generations pass, some of those stories don't carry forward. Mm-hmm. And I think we miss the opportunity to learn from the people that were here before us. And again, to learn from their story and what made them who they are, which then in turn makes us who we are. Mm-hmm. I think there's a disconnection happening in this busyness of life and technology and all of that we're losing track of some of the stories from our past. So I'm glad you're bringing these stories forward through your books.
Yes, I really enjoy it. I was trying to think while you were speaking about the little bit of math. If you go back 10 generations, just your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, no uncles, no aunts, no cousins. If you go back 10 generations, you are then related to 1,122 people, I think. Someone else can figure out the math. And those are your direct ancestors, just 10 generations back. And the other piece that's important to that is that if any one of them had not lived and reproduced, you would not be here this minute. Wow. That's how connected you are to those people. Like their lives mean you have your life.
And their stories mean that you have your stories. Mm-hmm. Right. I love that. And anything else that we missed, Anne, from your perspective, from Carolyn, that we should be talking about or celebrating from one of your amazing authors, part of your team?
I just think that she has demonstrated so beautifully why we love working with her. The whole, and her passion for her subject matter, and her enthusiasm, and kind of letting the characters take you where they're going to take you. Mm-hmm. So, from a middle grade novel to, these amazing historical fiction explorations. I think it's amazing. Historical fiction is one of my favorite genres as well. And I have, early childhood education in my past. So the kids' books, really resonate. I'm a little jealous that Marianne is her editor, but that's okay. I just think, it's really the importance of these partnerships, I think are also well illustrated. The support, the encouragement, don't get discouraged, keep, and 100,000 words, like I really applaud.
Come on.
That's incredible. And I, for one, as if I put my editor hat on, I prefer more than less. Mm-hmm. And I know it's really hard to cut.
Unfortunately, you do get attached to your characters, don't you?
Oh gosh, yes. Mm. Oh, yes. Mm. Yeah. And I'm a pantser as well. Like when yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. So CarolynNicholson.ca is a website for Carolyn. Now, Carolyn, I'm gonna take liberty here because I'm pretty sure you'll be okay with this. And can you please tell us about your services as well? I want to include links for you because I know Carolyn would probably appreciate this opportunity to shine a light on you and what you do. Can you share a little bit for the authors listening or looking for somebody just like you, Anne? Like, how do we work with you?
Yeah, I started OC Publishing in 2016. I was an author first, and I'm always the type of person that when I learn to do something new and start to develop, any type of, not expertise, but comfort with it. I like to teach other people. So I started mentoring other, indie authors many, many years ago, and then just formalized it. I'd been living overseas and moved home to Canada. So there's sort of three levels: the mentoring, the coaching, and the publishing. So I have a hybrid publishing company, and we basically take authors from, manuscript through to publication. And some authors, like with Carolyn, we started in a mentoring phase, and that just quickly evolved. I have 21 authors now that we're working with. We're currently scheduled out to the end of 2026, which is crazy. And most of our authors, I'd say 90% of our authors, always do more than one project. And it's, hybrid publishing is becoming more recognized. And, one piece of advice I would give is, do your due diligence. There's a lot out there, but, one is not the same as another. So, get to know the players involved, learn about their models, and a hybrid publishing model is a pay-to-publish model. So, just do your homework and talk to the people, talk to the authors who have worked with them.
Yeah, and we'll have links to your website as well and in the show notes so people can come and join in with you. Carolyn.
Yes, and you do promotion too, because this is a big part of why this is such a good organization, is that they help you to promote your book. It's such a crazy business, the book business, for an author on their own to try to figure their way through it is just almost impossible, from my point of view anyway. And so Anne knows all the ins and outs of how to do it. She even managed to get my book published in, Last Witch, published in Scotland. Or not published, I should say, carried in the store and distributed to Scotland.
Well,
there's a lot of moving parts. Yeah. But we really feel that we're true partners with our authors. And, there's a lot of interaction, there's a lot of communication. We just, right from, when we're approaching a launch, we do things like this. And of course, following launches, continuing to help get the word out. So we don't provide book marketing services, but as part of our partnership, when we work with an author, that's included in the package.
And for those listening right now who aren't seeing what I'm seeing, you need to understand that Carolyn is sitting in Anne's house to do this interview together. So if you have any question about whether or not Anne is on your side, Anne opened her home to have Carolyn come to do this recording together and made this all possible. So that's the type of person you're working with if you decide to come and work with Anne. That's who she is. And I'm very sure Carolyn would agree to that. So thank you, Anne, for making this happen, for giving me the opportunity to talk to Carolyn, because she's an amazing author and I love everything she does. So thank you for making this possible. Carolyn, I love what you do. And again, as a kindred Scots person together, you and I'm just celebrating you and your love for your family and your history and sharing it with us as readers. I think this is a great set of books, from children's, for adults, everything. You got it all covered. So thank you for sharing your stories with us and being so passionate about your family history. Thank you for sharing your words with the world. I'm eagerly anticipating more great things from you, working with Anne and her team. But keep writing, Carolyn. Keep sharing your stories, and thank you for making time to be on our podcast.
And Dave, thank you so much for what you do, for making it possible for authors to reach a whole lot of people that I would have no idea how to reach. So I appreciate that 100%.
We do have listeners in Scotland. So do you have any message to our listeners in Scotland, Carolyn?
Yes. I'll be back soon.
Roll out the red carpet, everyone. Carolyn's coming back home. So, Carolyn, thank you so much for doing this. And thank you for your help today and making this all happen. And thank you for what you do for authors.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Excellent. Everyone, all information is always in the show notes for both Anne and Carolyn. When you go buy Carolyn's books, you're going to buy them all. Obviously, you're going to buy an extra copy for all of your friends and family as well. And you're going to leave an amazing review for Carolyn's books. I want more people to fall in love with her and her words and her stories, and your reviews help authors. So don't do a simple thing like great author, great book. I need you to be a little more detailed and tell people why you love these books. When parents are looking for a great children's book, I want them to see your words about why you love Carolyn's book so much. So please, that's your duty as a listener and a reader. Support your fellow authors. Support the authors you love. Leave them a great review. And Carolyn, thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. Head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes. So finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.